it goes right back to the beginning. Leslie and Peter Green brought their 9-month-old baby to see me, who had a collection of symptoms, particularly lots of vomiting and not gaining very much weight. I was a relatively newly appointed consultant at the local hospital at that time, and Jenny was about 9 months old then. To cut a long story short, over the next 6 months, she was diagnosed as having cystinosis, and involvement of some of the specialist teams at the Alder Hey Children's Hospital, and then subsequently the Royal Manchester Children's Hospital. I think it was and Leslie and Peter talked to me about this, and I have to say, cystinosis was not a condition I'd come across very much, even in my training. It's a rare condition anyway. And they were astounded, as they've said many times before, about the lack of knowledge that was out there that they could find out about cystinosis and what the future held, I suppose, for Jenny at that time. From that then came the concept that they would form a research trust to research cystinosis, and from that expanded to sort of the whole field of metabolic disease. And I suppose the other thing that happened then is they asked me, and through their own research, found a number of clinicians who were interested in metabolic disease, including very experienced and very well-known paediatrician, who at that time was the president of the Royal College. No, he was going to be president of the British Paediatric Association. And he actually started off the system up in Manchester at that time. He had a number of trainees, and particularly Dr. Sadawala, and was the sort of leading light in that area at the moment. So I was able to perhaps put them in touch with these people who, really through my contacts, although they weren't particularly people I knew very well. And they then formed this trust of a few local people, and I got invited, as it were, to join the group at that stage. And that's really how it all started in 81. And they had this they had this publicity in the TV program, local production of Songs of Praise, which went out nationally. And from that, a number of people contacted them. And really from that, the trust grew. I mean, it was Leslie and Peter's back bedroom to their dining room, and then into the first office accommodation that they actually had. And so things built up. But that's really how I got started. I suppose I was providing medical advice, although they probably knew more about the condition than I did. But I had these contacts and were able to put them into touch with a few people. But I have to say, Leslie and Peter did an awful lot of it on their own without any help from me. And it was a learning curve as far as I was concerned as well at that time. So that's how it started. That's how I became a trustee. And I suppose I've never left, really. I think in the early stages, it was really, I was the medic on the trust board, and I suppose my role was to find out and liaise with and publicise to some extent the trust with the professionals working in the field of metabolic disease. At that time, we're talking now sort of mid 1980s, there were less than half a dozen consultants specialising in inherited metabolic diseases across the country, with two of them in Manchester. It wasn't a specialty within paediatrics medicine that was as well organised as it is now. Many children with metabolic disease were under the care of general paediatricians, including some of my own colleagues locally. it was really publicising that particular role. Here was an organisation that was wanting particularly to speak to parents where a rare condition that probably nobody ever heard of was diagnosed, and the parents that were naturally seeking information about that. There was also, Leslie and Peter realised there was a dearth of research into, well, cystinosis as far as Jenny was concerned, but other metabolic diseases that raised their heads at that time. That was in the early days. I think as things have progressed, it's really still bringing the trust board back to the topic of focusing on child and family disease, metabolic screening, the things that were actually important in that situation. Realizing also that other trustees round the table had got expertise in finance and in marketing and in publicity. And really, that I hope has been my role for the time. Learning curve. I mean, it was a learning curve at the beginning because I didn't know anything about being on a trust board or charities or anything in that situation. I'd come as a newly appointed consultant into a very busy job, and it was actually difficult. There wasn't a lot of time, but a case like this kind of focuses you, and that you actually need to perhaps give a bit of time to that. As time has gone on, then as the board has expanded and the people with expertise, as I said in the previous question, people with other expertise on the trust board have actually contributed significantly to the development, and perhaps particularly in the last 5 or 6 years, and in the recent changes since we've reinvented the trust as Metabolic Support UK, then there's an increased professionalism, I think, of people around the table being able to take the trust forward in that situation. And to some extent, I suppose much of my influence on it is at times superfluous. But I'm just happy to support any of the ventures that are actually going on at the moment. You come back to the beginning. The beginning, it was called a research trust for metabolic diseases in children. And the emphasis initially, I think, from Peter and Leslie was that the trust was actually going to sponsor primary research into metabolic disease. That's an expensive venture. I think the real achievements have been the family support, which started, in a small way, Leslie and Peter literally answering the phone, to the organisation that we have at the moment. People ringing you up when the diagnosis is made, the information that you have available on specific diseases, your ability to link families with each other if that's possible. That's, I think, the biggest achievement that has actually made. That parents are put in touch with parents, and obviously now developing our care communities, or single disease communities, which is part of the strategy, is to actually take that forward first. But it is this being a listening voice, an information voice on the end of the phone, which yourself and the team in the office and all the people who did that before you, that's been the primary sort of need in that situation. There are a lot of charities. There are the really big, highly organised charities. There are very small charities who have had a very difficult time, and obviously now with the recent COVID infection, funding for many more charities has gone in because you've had to cancel all your fundraising events and things. That's I think one of the biggest issues at the moment is actually raising money to keep the organisation going, and there's always been an issue about raising money. But people were prepared to run marathons and climb up hills and sit in baths of baked beans and do all sorts of strange things, organised events, non-organised events. I think funding has got very difficult. There are funds available from the Department of Health. The charities had grants and things, but it's hard work writing those grant applications, and you are just one among many actually trying to get funds for what you actually do. And a lot of time and effort is clearly spent doing those applications for funding, and you're in a very competitive market. So I think that's a huge challenge. But also I think the other challenge for us is being achieved, is for us to have another look at exactly what we do, and how we can provide it. And the development of the 2030 strategy, I think, has been a super piece of work, based on lots and lots of information from parents about what parents who manage their child's illness on a day-to-day basis. And many of those children now grown up, and we've got an adult population now who are surviving because of advances in treatment, in medicines, and in dietary, which just wasn't available some time ago. Also, I think more children are being diagnosed because of the developments of genetic diagnosis, and people are taking an interest in that particular field. So I think the biggest challenge still is, if you're going to do something, you do actually need money to do it, and at the moment it's raising that money. I think is a big issue. I think it has tried to keep pace with the developments in medical diagnosis. As I said earlier, when this all started, there were probably no more than half a dozen dedicated metabolic paediatricians in the country. And there were very, very few adult physicians who were looking after teenagers and young adults with these conditions. Some of those young people that have been through paediatricians are now surviving and managing and living normal lives, depending on what condition they've got. So we've had to look at the whole business of transition and take on board that some of these young people are surviving, living at school, or if they've got learning difficulties, being looked after by various groups. And it's all a question of supporting them, really, along the way. It is still people ringing you up in the office and talking to, and you providing information about all sorts of aspects of their care. I think that's how it's adapted. I think we are now looking at trustees as to what they can bring and their individual expertise to the charity, whether it be medical advice, pharmaceutical advice, information about the way drugs are managed and developed. So obviously, this has been a big development over the years of new drugs. People who've got marketing experience, people who've got experience of managing finances, and then somebody who's actually able to provide the big overview, like our chair at the moment, to bring that all together. We've had many parents act as trustees over the years, parents with first-hand knowledge of what it's like to have a child with a chronic long-term condition, either which has no treatment or has treatment but is difficult to administer. So that's they can bring that perspective as well to it. keep supporting us. It's difficult times. I can't get away from the fact, we do need money to run the charity. And there are lots of calls on people's money. There are lots of charities out there with very valid need for money. So the IMD community does raise lots of money. Talk to us. We've done surveys now about what the IMD community's needs are, what the problems are. We're trying to inform the relevant medical and pharmaceutical companies about metabolic disease. I think one of the difficulties is that we're an umbrella organisation. We actually are covering a lot of individual rare conditions. The message is that we're there for them in that situation.
Leslie and Peter Green have a 3-year-old daughter with a rare metabolic disorder, cystinosis, which until very recently has been regarded as incurable.
If I'd have thought that we were just going to have to, for the rest of our daughter's life, however long that is, just kneel down and pray, that for me would not be enough. I feel that apart from faith, you must do something yourself. I feel that God helps those who help themselves. And so when we were told that our daughter's condition was life-threatening, but too rare for a cure to be found because there's no money, we thought we must do something about that. We can't just sit back and watch our child die. And when we, in fact, looked into the situation further, we found there were no support groups for people like ourselves. So we decided, well, if there isn't one, that is what we must do. We must set one up ourselves.
I think the founding of the Trust itself has been a great help to us, and when we discovered that not only was information not reaching parents of children with rare diseases, but information was not in fact reaching doctors either, we've already found that we've been able to help people. We've had many letters from parents of children who've got rare complaints. We've had many letters from doctors who've appreciated what we're doing.
For a long time I've learned, and my husband has learned, to live day by day. So each day which goes well, we thank God for. Each day that doesn't go quite so well, we say, well, at least she's recovering. So we take each day, day by day, and we feel that if there is a chance for a better treatment, and then after a better treatment, a cure for her condition, we are all the time getting more time to put her right.
Of course, the ultimate is for us to raise enough money to employ a researcher to actually sit down in front of a microscope and discover something. That's some way off yet, but it's got off to a good start.